Hello, everybody, he said, trying to make sure that I don't say good morning because it's not good morning for everybody when they listen to them. But, anyway. Jamie here. Welcome to another No Rocket Ships episode. And to my guest, Meghan Stabler. Meghan,
Hello.
introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Jamie. I am Meghan Stabler. I'm a seasoned marketer, formerly of Big Commerce, and now a co-founder at Alenta.
We're called luminaries nowadays, Meghan.
Luminaries. Okay.
Yeah. I got called a luminary yesterday, which is better than a legend.
I love it.
We'll be luminaries. Okay, so rocket ships rules, three subjects, three questions. Um, your background, you go quite a long way back in. I looked this morning, kind of big old school tech, actually, BMC Computer Associates before Big Commerce.
Yes.
But marketing for a long time in the
Yeah.
technology world.
Yeah.
And so my first question really is, has marketing got any better or worse in technology in the last 10? You can go back as far as you want, by the way. And if so, why?
Wow. What a powerful question for you to start the day off as a luminary with a seasoned, experienced background. I think marketing has gotten, well, obviously, here's the answer. It's tougher. Right? The old days, if I do go back into the 90s, into my Computer Associates days, Computer Associates then became CA Technologies, then acquired by Broadcom. Marketing back then really was, I'm going to say, more ABM-like for me, which is what people are trying to do today. So it's more sort of one-on-one marketing. You folded your marketing plans together based off of territories or regions, or based off of your ICP, financial services, banks, right? Whatever it may be. And then you also focused on the personas more so with the economic buyer, as we call it nowadays. And you would do marketing to and with them in terms of events, lunches, dinners, the boys' network of golfing outings and stuff like that. Trade shows were still pretty big back then, but obviously digital marketing wasn't around other than ads. And these were the days when, to get in front of you, Jamie, as an executive at a company, we would be using the equivalent of the FedExes back then to send you something, to equip and empower the sales team with thought leadership pages, papers, and trifold documents that we would leave on your desks. But back then, it really was a lot more account management, account visits, backed up by content that was produced by marketing. And marketing also had a lot more focus on PR, so public relations, placement stories, articles that could also be echoed into magazines, CIO Review, Computer Weekly, those types of things. So there's a large focus on the printed content that you could then repurpose and send via mail to somebody or empower the sales team. So the complexity came because of .com. The complexity has come because of how you and I may want to receive the marketing literature and information. The complexities come because of regulations, GDPR, CCPA, and a whole host of others. Complexities come because we like to get our content or information across multiple services. And then you have to rank, you have to Google search, you now have agentic, you've got to look at GEO and SEO, you're competing against keyword rankings. You're still doing some of those same things I talked about before in terms of events, materials, thought leadership, but you're packaging it up in a digital world, trying to create that experience that is hopefully unique for Jamie, but maybe more tailored for your business and your business profile. So it's become complex because the data, the information we have access to, has to be presented in a way that is meaningful to you. And ultimately, because you're not thinking about reading an article for an hour as you're sitting in your comfy chair with a nice crackly fire and a glass of wine, you're trying to read the article in 30 seconds or less because of the way Twitter or X was back then with 140 characters and soundbite news, right? There's no longer 24-hour news, it's news in seconds.
And the other thing that struck me recently was that, back then, and by the way, I worked for Ziff Davis in the 90s, and
Okay.
Computer Associates were my client in Long Island. So
You took my money back then from Long Island.
I
I was
took your
based in,
money.
in Long
Yeah, yeah,
Island, Hong Kong.
I did.
Yeah.
I took your money.
Yeah.
Um, we'll talk more about that in a while. I the other thing is back then, what it struck me recently is that there were more customers back then than there were vendors. There were not many vendors really back then, and now there's 25,000 vendors and the same number of customers there were back then. Really, there aren't loads more customers. There's just so the noise and the scrambling of the channels has just made it more and more difficult. So I suppose going back to my initial question, better or worse, is the marketing that's being delivered better or worse than you think it was back then? Because I got a rosy glow when you started talking about print, and we're both luminaries. So
I think it's hard to say better or worse. Look, obviously I answered it saying it's gotten more complicated. Um, I think marketing is a lot more creative nowadays than it was back then. We can do a lot of things a lot faster to be creative, right? Marketing principles still stay the same, right? It's the connect to the heart and the head. And if you can connect and layer in the logic of the head and the heart of emotion, hopefully you're getting a buyer or at least somebody that says, tell me more. Your comment when you were talking about the different phases of marketing is, you're trying to create a brand to stand out. That's ultimately it. You're trying to create a memorable experience that can turn people into ambassadors for your product or for your solutions, right? So the ROI of a product and who's using it and why are they using it, what's innovative about your product, what's making it stand out, how you're capturing the mind of not just one person but a whole host of person. That FOMO experience, right? The viral FOMO experience that you see Apple and others do when the latest iPhone comes out or at least the latest gadget is coming out. That's what you're trying to create. So standing out is absolutely the hardest thing nowadays. I mean, let's bring it into the past world that I was in e-commerce, right? How do you stand out with your brand if you are selling some sort of consumer product, especially if you're selling through a marketplace? It's extremely hard. Some of the D2Cs do it extremely well because they only have one thing or a group of things to go ahead and sell, so they can create their brand and push it out there. But for marketers, it is probably akin to whack-a-mole right now. That thing of I'm trying to hit all these factors, and we are still bludgeoned to death ourselves by where are your KPIs, what are your metrics, how are you performing, right? Are you doing full-blown ABM or light ABM? How much is your spend? Why are you spending so much? Why are you spending so much on ads, right? You have to qualify everything you're doing. You're probably looking at, as you said, the number of customers probably isn't increasing if you're doing B2B. I mean, there are obviously new B2Bs that are coming out that you want to sell to, especially in the infrastructure space, the startup space that I'm in. I'm getting, I'm going to use the word second time now on this, bludgeoned to death by people trying to attract me to use their latest infrastructure management tool, security tool, creative services, digital experiences, digital marketing. I don't need it right now. I'm AI first. Everything I'm doing is built in GCP and other things. I don't need all these other services, but they're trying to stand out in a world that for B2B is small. And then in the B2C world, you're trying to stand out against a bunch of competitors when you're selling your clothing, your glasses, whatever it may be. So there's a ton of different things that makes it a lot worse for marketers. But there's also a lot of tools that hopefully make it a lot easier for marketers too.
yes, I think what I suppose I feel like I want to celebrate is an improvement in creativity, maybe in the last 3 or 4 years. And maybe that's possibly, I don't know why that's happening. I think I'm pleased that it is happening. I see it specifically in the event space, right? People are being much more creative. The fact that Contentful are doing Bake Off, Contentful wouldn't have done anything remotely creative 5 years ago. Sort of feels like something that's quite, a good thing to do. I wonder, yeah, I hope that continues because you
I hope
feel
so
like,
too. That whole creative experience, right? I mean, that fell out in my way. I mean, we were doing experiences at events in the 90s and the 2000s, right? You used to go to an event and there was a magician on every corner that was doing something, and you probably embedded the narrative, the story that they were saying, because I did this at BMC Software. I did this at another startup I was at called Web Collage, which was I did get a brilliant magician, and I had him weave into the story of the group of people that are around him to get people to raise their hand if they were doing certain things or if they were facing certain challenges. And over the series of questions and stories and magic tricks that you do, this group of people would be whittled down. Still a large crowd, but the people that we knew in sales we wanted to target were whittled down. And then he would use their badges and say, hey, just give me your badges for a second. As we got their badges, we were taking their names down because they'd already identified that they had certain problems. So that creativity in bringing that experience together has been around for a long time. I think it accelerated post-COVID, right? When we had to get more and be unique. I think the whole lunch dinner experience is overused now. Everybody's hosting a dinner with a luminary, curated set of people come in and listen to us talk about something. We're not going to be a vendor that spends an hour speaking. We're going to spend 5 minutes. We're going to have one or two clients of ours speak as well. Then we're going to have a nice dinner and we're going to follow up. I'm sorry, those are just done and said things. It's now about the experiences. But you've got to get to your target ICP and personas to get that right.
Yes, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, as you know, I sort of pulled away from having done loads and loads of that stuff for years. I just feel like it's a little bit contrived.
Yes.
And now that I run this community of customers, I know what they I know how they see contrived. Yes, it's all contrived, but there is some authenticity to be found. I think probably if
Yeah,
you really
I think as well, Jamie, that as a marketer, I would say that some of those old tried tested things are good to do depending on the maturity of the vertical or the ICP you're trying to go after, right? If it's a mature vertical, it's probably more 70% optimizing your demand gen and 30% testing new things, including experiences. If it's a sort of new vertical you're trying to get into, maybe it's 10% optimizing your demand gen because you're not quite on it yet, and it's probably 90% testing different things to get to them, whether it's thought leadership, digital articles, or the experiences, right? You probably want to lean more into that in the new vertical, or you're a new entrant into some kind of market, than if you're trying to sell into a mature thing. It's just, I think, yeah, I call myself seasoned. You called it luminaries. It's the toolbox that we bring out depending on who we need to get to and market to create those qualified leads or quality leads versus quantity of leads.
So you just raised question two. So our second subject is this idea of demand gen, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I run a demand gen agency for 20 years. I don't even really know what it means, if I'm honest, when you really think about it. We're creating anyway, but I'll shut up. Marketing has a relationship and runs demand gen, but demand gen is kind of owned by sales. So you've been involved, you've been in that world for a long time in very large organizations, and you've helped those teams and those functions scale. If you were building a demand gen machine now, and again, let's maybe just go back to that sort of big commerce period which is probably the most recent and functional for the audience that will listen to this. People who like me and know me are probably econ people largely. If you were doing it again now, what would you do? Not what would you do differently, because that's pointless. What would you do now? Where would you spend your time at building demand gen now?
Yeah. Well, let me try and unpack some of your opening statement. Building demand with sales. I mean, that is key. Any CMO or any marketer, let's just do it for any marketer, should be embedding themselves with the sales organization as often as possible to understand what's working, what's not. What you don't want to be in a world of is we're marketing, generating leads, right? The demand gen. Your sales taking that lead and pulling it through and then qualifying it further, and we never really meet in the middle and talk too much other than looking at KPIs. What's the number of MQLs you're passing over that are sales qualified or sales accepted? I've grown up through the sales organization myself as a consultative seller, the Sandlers, the Aklavus, right, solution selling stuff, and then sort of transitioned into marketing where I've seen both sides. And I'm also a product developer many, many moons ago, so I've got the tech aspect. What we have to do today, and I did this towards the end of my time at Big Commerce, was spend a lot more time with sales on understanding their needs than their narratives. So let me unpack my statement
Mm.
there a little bit. If marketing is doing creative demand gen, we're putting out thought leadership because we recognize that I'm just going to make it up. In the enterprise space, you are dealing with more regulatory compliance. Businesses want to know your SOX status, your ISO status, a bunch of other things. Therefore, you've got to create some thought leadership because a CISO, Chief Information Security Officer, or CTO is going to be looking at your tech stack and wanting to know that you check all the boxes, right? You've got to create some thought leadership for them. So you go ahead and you create that. You put it out in demand gen. You've got digital. You're doing some paid digital assets. You're maybe doing some retargeting, 6 cents in the old days and some other stuff just to see what's going on. And then you're talking to sales. You've done some sales enablement. Yeah, this is what we're doing. This is how we're doing it. But if it's not landing and sales are now beginning to look at RFPs, they're talking to the CISOs, and the CISOs are still asking questions, but you in marketing haven't changed your narrative, or you haven't addressed current topics, CCPA, and one's out of step, or there's a new regulatory compliance and it's not in there, but you're not talking to how sales are feeling it, because sales are the ones that are on the phone or in a face conversation, then you're missing it. So that's just a pull out of my back example, right? But if you're not talking to the SDRs on your content and their emails, and you're not linking this whole narrative journey from marketing, creative, demand gen, all the way through to sales and RFPs, RFIs, and even the contracts and the follow up, and there isn't a thread, you're missing stuff from it. And we do tend to over edge on digital nowadays and cost of digital. And I think we need to pull back on it. I don't like digital marketing at the best of times. It's a suck.
Really interesting. And as you talk about it, so that makes complete sense to me. And just to get slightly more granular, because it's a great example. How long do you let how long do you let that work that's about how long do you leave that before you judge whether or not it's landing and it needs to be adjusted? What's the cycle, do you think?
It has to be fast, right? The worst thing for me was when content writers came and said, "Isn't it great? I wrote 3 content articles this week." So their measurement is, I wrote 3 articles for content for blog. I'm done, right? The web person would be going, "I stuck the article up there. It is great, right? It is in the hero section or just below the fold, or it's at some other place, or we've put into some paid ad or maybe some link back stuff that's going on. I'm done." Somebody else goes, "Well, I'm looking at the metrics and the numbers, right? We're getting a number of clicks. I'm done." If that isn't integrated, right, and if the content person doesn't care about the placement, the usage, the clicks, the length of time spent by a user of a qualified user on content, that content conversion into tell me more, right? I need to know more. If that isn't being measured, then the content person isn't being successful. So where I'm going with this, Jamie, is that the commercial mindset, that entrepreneurial commercial mindset, needs to be infused inside of marketers. And I've seen that gap disappear with, I don't want to be so controversial that I'm going to get called out, but the younger generation, right? They care about the do. I did it, I did this, I wrote this, I delivered on this thing, right? The older ones of us are going, yes, but what effect did it have? So to answer your question, I think you've got to be measuring this stuff very regularly, right? You've got to have like your end of week KPI performance. We put it on the Monday. These are all the activities we did to put it in there. These are the clicks. This is the through. This is the cost. This is whatever it may be, and working on it. And then you've got to be talking across that chain I talked about before.
Yeah.
The content is going into what from a BDR or an SDR perspective? How are their emails performing? Are they using the same narrative, right? And that's where folks like me that are deeply rooted product marketers go into the messaging and the narrative to see, is the messaging working, yes or no? What are you doing in terms of A/B testing? Does one work better than the other? right? And pulling that then into sales so that you've got that narrative. So for me, it is a relentless pursuit of revenue across every facet of marketing and dripping it and involving yourself with sales. We've done it. I've done it in the past. We did it at Big Commerce by ensuring that we had these interlock moments, albeit it was happening every month, but having the interlock moments with sales, and then being an executive, being part of the weekly rev reviews and seeing what was actually happening in marketing and seeing that this is what marketing is doing. This is what we're seeing as conversion. This is what's happening with the SDRs as far as taking it through to this. And that goes back to a comment I made, and I'll end it with this, that you didn't pick up on, which was often marketers figure, especially in the SaaS business, they talk about the quantity of MQLs, right? That martini glass. I've always said it is about the quality of the MQL, not about the quantity, because if we're not refining it, hence the conversations, we're losing.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think I put a thing on LinkedIn this week that says, as you know, I run a demand gen agency. I've run that martini glass for clients for 20 years. And since effectively ending the life of that part of the business that I run, I'm out 6 months out of that. I think I've made something like 14 introductions between vendor and client, and you know, they're beautifully crafted introductions, right? Because I know everybody on all sides. I've only made one of the introduction. I've only made one introduction on each case. So, there's only one vendor getting that opportunity. They're the best quality introductions you can probably get. So if you think about scale in the old world, in the world that you just described, that could be, and I'm not joking, that could be 1,000 MQLs that have come down to 14 actual opportunities
Yeah,
easily,
yeah.
because of the numbers that we've both seen. So I totally agree with you. I think I'm a better demand gen machine now than I ever was. But that's really, you can't scale a business based on, Jamie making introductions when he feels like it.
You can't. You can't. And that's the complexity to answer the beginning questions of this, right? That we had is marketing more complex now? Yes, it is. Because we have to think about so many different variants, right? If you're doing, like I'm in a startup, I'm doing 0 to 1 marketing, right? I'm looking at building core messaging platforms. I'm trying to get it right. I'm changing the narrative based off of not every not the last conversation we had, but I'm looking at themes and segments of themes that are coming through so I can make sure that I adjust. But you and I bring this wealth of experience, not just as operators to get it done, right? I can roll my sleeves up and do a Riverside session, or I can write content, I can do thought leadership, I can do digital demand gen as needed, or even web copy nowadays with Lovable. But I'm also a strategic operator, right? Where I can look at what's needed and what do we have to adjust coming down the road as you move from 0 to 1 marketing into true startup mode, seed found, then into A, B, as you're beginning to scale and grow. And then, as you put it, right, I've been with these big multi-billion-dollar tech companies. So what do we need? And the tech stack changes, the MarTech stack changes as you go through it too.
Yeah, I think as maybe I'm living now in my own little bubble, but I just only really care about engagement now.
It is about engagement.
I just, all of the other metrics, it's starting to feel slightly irrelevant to me now because I know the customers so well. Craig at Liberty tells, I've told this story millions of times, 380 invitations for coffee at RTS last year.
Nuts.
It's nuts. It's absolutely nuts.
The number of Apple AirPods that I could have gotten for free this year has been amazing from different vendors. Maybe my Christmas list is going to be giving away AirPods. I've not even taken one of those meetings. It doesn't make sense. But here's just to end this a little bit. Here's the other thing that irks me to the effest, right? Is don't send me a generic email talking about how you can help me fix X if you haven't researched my business and haven't looked at it. In the old days, you and I, when I was at Computer Associates, BMC Software, back at CA Technologies again, I was looking at the 10Ks, the 10Qs. I was looking at the annual report. I was researching news. I was seeing if I'm going after a CIO, who or she is she, where is she speaking, what has he said, what is the direction they're trying to take the company. And I was crafting our messages. Again, I mentioned that sort of we were doing something like ABM back then to ensure that you got that unique experience, which meant you would receive it. Again, I'm an old solution seller going, this person actually cares about my business. They've done their research and they know. And we're losing that with this generic, I've got 1,000 or 10,000 people in my email database. I'm just going to send out a blanket email and I'm hopefully going to catch 5 or 10. It's going to work for you, but your credibility is going to be lost against all these other ones.
What you don't understand is how many people you pissed off for the 5 people who engaged,
Yeah,
and it's a lot. I mean,
yeah,
it's a lot. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. No, you've been listening to all the customer episodes of No Rocket Ships because that's what they all say. They
yeah,
all just say, "Don't send them,
yeah,
just don't send them." And actually, weirdly, as you kind of go back to those moments in there, I have such a strong memory having read your LinkedIn of my drive out to Long Island to see Computer Associates when in my Hugo Boss suit with my big hair when I had big hair. Um, the other thing we would have done would we just say, I'm trying to get in touch with Meghan, the executive I'm trying to sell to, but I'm going to leverage the other people in Meghan's business that I
yeah,
have met to get
yeah,
to Meghan.
yeah,
And again, I just don't see it being done
yeah,
properly.
yeah.
And that's just, I mean, that's marketing, supporting sales to go and get that done
It is,
too.
but that's
Oh,
marketing understanding that you have the economic buyer, the person that's probably going to sign the contract, and you have a bunch of influencers that can say, "Hey, I met with Jamie. He's a good guy. I think he's got a good proposition. I think you should make some time for him." Right? And it is. I think today we try the shotgun approach in marketing, but we're trying it with a laser sharpshooter rifle to try and get to you, and we're not realizing that there's a bunch of other people that can influence that we need to get to before we get to that economic buyer to create the story, to create the ROI, to build out the value proposition that makes them go, without this product, without this solution, without this feature function, whatever it is you're trying to promote, cross sell, upsell, without it, my business is not going to grow. And so creating those influencers who say, hey, Jamie, we need this. And I think this is a great person you need to talk to.
now, final subject, and we are unfortunately because this is the tricky one. This
Out
could
of time.
this could get ugly. So let's
Yeah.
make this one short. I remember Computer Associates being it was well known of being a
Oh,
really
yeah.
horrible place to work, right? It was sharp elbowed to the max.
Mm,
That's what
mm,
I was always told.
mm,
Let's assume that is true. You
mm.
can tell me that I'm wrong, but has tech got any more or less sharp elbowed in the years since?
From the perspective of
The way
the
that way that people are treated.
Yeah, I think it is sharp elbowed. I mean, we've got a lot more wokeism in there nowadays. The DEI trying to make sure that people's voices are accommodated. You know, as a board of director on a publicly traded company, and I sit on other boards as well. I always make the statement of look around the room, pretend there's an empty chair, and then figure out who's not in that chair, because that's probably the voice that you want to have in the room with you. I've tried to do that and bring that into my marketing roles as well by including a range of voices, even when I've been driving new market segments, new market opportunities, is not just driven by myself. I've tried to include others in the room, meaning I want to get a sales lead in, I want to get a legal person, I want to get a finance. So you create these ambassadors, much like we just talked about, trying to get higher up. Um, I think it is sharp elbowed. I do think there is a world, especially in the economic situation that we're currently in, right? We're seeing a lot of layoffs in market, especially out of marketing, because of what AI is perceived to be able to deliver. And therefore, the hunt for landing a role is tougher. The hunt for keeping a role is equally as tough, right? You've got to be seen as delivering and happy and, oh, yes, if you need that, I'll go do it for you. Don't worry about it. I've got it. But I still believe that we need to focus on the end result, which is revenue, being commercially obsessed. Um, has it changed much? I don't know. I mean, having been on the inside of CA, it was tough. I wouldn't say it was a bad place to work for. I think you have to have an entrepreneurial spirit, and that's what Charles Wong, who was the CEO before Sanjay, moved into that role, and really encouraged with all of us was to compete, to bring out the best. You don't have to have the answer. You just need to know that it's okay to ask the question, to learn, to have a growth mindset. Growth mindset is what we talk about nowadays.
Yeah,
I think a lot of the principles that we had back then to build, grow, do, and drive, be open to new opportunities, new ideas, be uncomfortable, or sorry, be comfortable with being uncomfortable. That was one of the hardest things for me because as a Brit in New York, I was used to just doing the do. And Charles was like, just get out there, kid. Just try it. If it fails, admit it, but learn from it and do it again. And I think that that is something that I try to ensure that any of my team members aspire to today, that it's okay to fail because you tried and you're going to learn. The sharp edge stuff, the elbowing, yeah, it's still around. I think it's just how you manage people and accommodate the voices.
yeah. No, I think you're right. I think it is still around. I mean, it's strange, isn't it? I mean, I've been in and around tech for, my whole career, and it still kind of feels like the Wild West. And in lots of ways, that's because it moves so quickly. And part of it becomes very frustrating because you just want it to grow up. But equally, maybe that's why we're all kind of still around it
Well,
because
it's never going to grow up. Look, we as humans, we're innovators, right? We're not going to reinvent the circle, right? We're not going to reinvent the wheel, although some have tried to do triangles and squares and stuff like that for wheels. But we're innovators. We're problem solvers. I think that the greatest thing about humanity, including humanity in marketing, is we want to help. We want to try something different. If something doesn't work, we want to find a way around. That's the innovation angle. If somebody's having a struggle, as long as they admit, hey, this is not working for me and I don't know the answer, be comfortable saying that. And then others will come forward, right? Which as humans, we want to help. And I think the best thing for a marketer today is have that growth mindset. AI is coming at you if you're not already using it. You've got to embrace it. I think there's going to be not a .com bust, but a AI bust at some point coming
I agree.
through. But beyond the leading edge, experiment and test. If you don't know something, oh, I've heard this thing about an MCP server, and I need to, well, go ask somebody, go play with it. Oh, I don't know how to use, why is Claude different to, OpenAI? Which should I use, right? Go play with it, go see what you can do, go experiment, and then infuse that into the work that you do. So I think as humans, all of this change is actually good for us as a whole. And it's to answer your question, it's never going to settle. We shouldn't settle. Our customers, our consumers are not asking for us to settle. But as we talked about, they want us to market to them uniquely. And therefore, we have to be very unique in the way that we market and we have to experiment.
Megan, that's the perfect time to end. Thank you very much for your time, and that was fascinating. Thank you.
Yes, my friend.